Welcome back. Well, when you look at the thumbnail, urinating in the ministry, well, maybe you're guilty of that. I know I am. After 30 years of being a Jehovah's Witness and being out in the ministry, we used to have to do 1,000 hours a year to be a pioneer. And you go out all those hours, you eventually have to use the washroom. Now, in most cases, there's a washroom available. Maybe there's a service station if you're in the city. You can go to a restaurant or something like that, or maybe a McDonald's, buy a coffee, use their washroom. That's what we used to do. But a lot of times you're out in the ministry for hours upon hours upon hours. And now we used to go out in the country ministry, the country territory. We used to have a vast country territory with our congregation. And no one liked to really go out there because it was so far, and you'd have to plan like a whole day because you have to drive for sometimes almost an hour to get to your territory. And there's no washroom facilities. It's just farmers after farmers after farmers, acreages, and so on and so forth. So you end up going out in the ministry. It's lunchtime. Maybe you packed a bag lunch. You had your lunch, had your drink, and you have to use the facilities. Well, there's not a lot of choices in the ministry. So you find a road or a place you can park. Sometimes, and I was in a position where I was holding my bladder, and then I got to a house, and it was all treed in and so forth. There was a farm, and no one was home. And we used to go to the back door. That was back in the 80s. And the 90s. We used to do that in the 90s. But then they said in the 2000s, you can't do that no more. You can no longer go to the back doors of people's houses because sometimes they're sunbathing, maybe with nothing on. I went to the back door once, and that happened. That was embarrassing. But anyways, I wanted to say thank you to Ex-Witness Awake. When we were out in Toronto, he gave me this shirt. I survived 1975, and all I got was old. So if you don't know who Ex-Witness Awake is, this is his website. Jonathan is his name. He lives in Toronto. And he's been doing a lot on this website, Telltale Universe. He's got two, I call them websites, but they're YouTube channels. Tale Tellers Universe. And if we just look at this, it gives a nice overview of who Jonathan is. He says, "Hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm an inspiring writer and voice actor." And he says, "Step into the universe of imagination." So he's designed this channel for all of us and anybody to look at. They're 100-word stories, short, packed. They're good, exciting stories. So if you haven't subscribed to Jonathan's channel, Tale Tellers Universe, right there. Subscribe to it, please. I'll put a link to this in the bottom of this video because I just thought it was so nice. We went out and met his wife and his son, and we had a picnic, and we had a great visit, shared some experiences, so we hope to see Jonathan again. Now, I'm going to get back to my story here. Thumbnail, yeah. So here we are. Now, I made this video twice. Originally, I made this video. This was the guy that wrote this story that I'm going to read you. His name is Lasse. If you haven't heard of him, he's from Norway. We ran some videos on him from Norway with the Norway trial. And now he's posting a 3-part story of how he woke up, how I woke up from the Jehovah's Witness cult. This is the first part of it right there. And I almost ran the video, then I went back to here and I thought this is the story right here. And I'll let you guys decide. This just, my wife and I talked about this for 2 days. So this is the story. Anyways, I really enjoyed that. I'm going to share this with you guys, the story. And it's right on Reddit. It's only been out a couple of days. Lasse got it out for us to read. He says, here comes part one of my life story as one of Jehovah's Witnesses and how I woke up from the cult. It's interesting, and he says it's an exciting story. You must hear it. Lasse starts the story. He gives a little bit of history on himself. He says he was born in 1964. Wow, I was born in 1963. We're almost the same age. And he says he was 2 years old when his mother was baptized in 1966. He says, so I have been a member of Jehovah's Witnesses for 58 years of my life. I was baptized in 1983 in Oslo. That's in Norway at a local convention. And I think that's the year I was baptized, 1983. Baptized at a local convention. And he says, I have been in 16 different congregations in Norway. Started as a regular auxiliary pioneer in 1986. He was there until 1988. Then he started as a regular pioneer and had that assignment until 2006. That's a lot of years. And then he became a ministerial servant in 1990. He was there until 94. And then he became an elder, and he was there for 12 years until 2006. And so he says the first thing that made him wake up, and it happened early in 89, 90, he says he studied medicine at the University of Stavanger in secret because he knew that a college education was not allowed. And he says, I did this for 4 years and only had a year left to graduate until one day I was exposed by the elders of the congregation. Someone had observed me at a medical lecture and reported me to the elders. And then suddenly one day I was visited by 2 elders and they asked if I went to college. So he said I had to give an honest answer. And he said, yeah, I'm going to college. So they then gave me 2 choices. They said college education was a complete waste and the faithful discreet slave. Their directive is very clear, and the elders wanted to know why he did it in secret. And then the elders argued it was just a complete waste of time. It was an idiotic argument, he says. He had nothing going. And it was the following point to the medical education when the new world was just around the corner. They said, why do you need it? The new system's going to be here. We won't need doctors. This is what elders would tell us. You know, I'll tell you guys, if I didn't have a doctor in the last part of my life, I wouldn't be here. We all need to see a doctor at one time or another. So it's just ludicrous, stupid reasoning that these elders come up with. And yet they pretend to be doctors with the HLC. They walk around the hospital with their suits on and they pretend and they try to mingle with the doctors. But they're not doctors. So here the Lasse goes to be a doctor. He gets cornered by the elders. They say, Lasse, you have 2 choices. You can complete your college education in medicine. We can't stop you from doing that. But in the end, it'll put an end, they said, it'll put an end to your spiritual career as a pioneer. And choice number 2 was you can continue as a pioneer, but then you have to finish your college education in medicine, and that way you show obedience to the faithful slave. See, I think this is a translation issue, but I think he has to quit his college education in medicine. In that way, he would show obedience to the faithful and discreet slave. See, he's translating from Norwegian to English, so we'll get a little bit of that in this article. And he says, then you can, the elders said to him, then you can focus on spiritual career and the truth. And these elders said, you're not far away from being appointed as a ministerial servant later. You can also become an elder. We need you, Lasse. So the elders pleaded with him, we need you to come back. And he says, here in this next paragraph, he says this was the stupidest choice that he has ever made. Imagine he could have been a doctor today. He was only a year away from it. This stupid choice has bothered me a lot over the years, he says. I've been plagued with guilt. I've blamed myself. I've been ashamed of this. Exchanging a medical career in real life with a spiritual career, a fantasy created world, a paradise earth that is man-made by some self-appointed people from the governing body. because that's what it is, this paradise earth. It's man-made, it's not real. And he says, fortunately, I have come over this a long time ago using special mental healing process, which I'll go into in another part of my life story. So now he gets into a little summary. He says, I knew that the college education was forbidden and not recommended, so I finished my education with only 1 year left. He only had 1 year left in his doctor education. He says he had so many different jobs ahead, so I could support myself, so I could continue as a pioneer. I then ended up with my own window cleaning company. So he traded a doctor's career for a window cleaning company. And we see a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses do that. They choose that. One of the people are ordering the cups in. Hope you get it. These are a stainless steel cup. You can get them right on YouTube, right on our site. And we put the print, we give them the print to put on them, fixing your faith, live your life with love. So, excellent cup. They are quite expensive, but they are worth it. They keep your coffee hot all day, literally all day. My wife is still drinking her coffee from this morning, and it's it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and her coffee's still warm. Is your coffee warm still, hon? Mm-hmm. Yeah, she says it's warm. So here he ran his window cleaning company for 16 years. He says, I've never lost interest in medicine, so I studied my whole life on a hobby basis. And I've also studied psychology, biology. I'm a person who likes to explore and study. He says, my biological father was never in the truth, as we called it, but he was a musician, played at weddings, other festive occasions. And he says, I had obviously inherited my musical talent from my father, so I started playing for dances at weddings for Jehovah's Witnesses, which I still do, but not for Jehovah's Witnesses anymore. I stopped doing that in 2009 when I became inactive as a Jehovah's Witness, but still playing for dances to this day at pubs and weddings and birthdays. The next paragraph he talks about the content of the preaching. He says it was a lie. But the working methods were funny. He's going to talk about the preaching work, what he did. But we all know that when we get out, the whole preaching thing that Jehovah's Witnesses do is a big fat lie. It's just a waste of time. Better to go spend time at the food bank, if we would have known that now, helping real people in a real charity. But some of the stuff that happens in the preaching work is quite funny. He says, I have lots of good and fun field experiences from my pioneer days. And if I completely ignore the content of the lies, he says, I preached. And I think that's how a lot of us feel. If we ignore all the stuff that was in it, we actually went out and preached. And we did some of that using the Bible. Now, he says, I always like to challenge myself to do extreme things in the preaching methods. And I remember once taking a train from Oslo to Stavanger. The train was set up 30 minutes before it was to leave, and he resolutely set off. He had over 400 magazines of the Watchtower and the Awake, and he put these in all the seat pockets, and all where people would sit. So he went to all the different carriage cars in the beginning, set it all up. And he had over 400 magazines, and they were in every seat on the train. He thought that when people sit in the train, they're always looking for something to read. When you go on a plane, you're going through that pocket in front of you, checking out everything to see what's in it so you could read it, because you're stuck there in that seat for so long. Well, he was right. When the train started to head towards Stavanger, an incredible amount of people sat and read the magazines. And he says they were curious about the magazines too. And he says in this way he found out who was interested, and he went from the first carriage to the next carriage and then to the last carriage, and he talked to people that liked the magazines. And he told them that he was the one that put them there, and he got in a lot of good conversations. He got 7 hours of field service on there, and it was always a big thing to hand your field service in with a lot of magazine placements. Imagine placing 400 magazines. Now, of course, we're not getting paid for those magazines. They're probably older editions. That's what we used to do. You'd go to the Kingdom Hall and there'd be all these older editions behind the literature counter, just stacks of magazines, stacks of them. And they would throw them out after a while. So we got into doing something like that in the country territory. But this was incredible. 400 magazines on the train, and in 7 hours. And he went up and down talking to people. So, of course, we all know that these are lies, the field ministry, we were in it. But isn't it nice to reflect on this, reflect on some of the good points, some of the things that we enjoyed, that we felt good about our achievements? Of course it is. Here's another one. And he says, this field experience shows that how extremely indoctrinated he was. He says, a comical experience. He says, we were in a vacant district. We were inside a large residential area, and I was extremely pee sick. His bladder was full. He had to use the washroom. There was nowhere he could use the washroom. Go have a pee. Now this is going to be, he says, this is going straight to my pants, he thought. He's going to pee his pants. To his great relief, he came to a house that was covered with a large hedge around the entire house. So this is inside a big residential area. There's no country roads you can go hide down or stop and pull off behind trees. This is all residential areas. So he found this place with a hedge around the house. So he says, I hoped and I thought, I hope no one is home there, he says. And to my great relief, no one was home. So he quickly got out his what does it say there? Well, we call it, a thing. He got out his penis, and he just had to pee on the wall of the house, right by the front door. It was really liberating. It felt like a mini version of Niagara Falls, he says. He says, while I was emptying my bladder, the door suddenly opened, and the person was home anyways. And he was shocked. The guy at the door was shocked. He says, what the hell are you doing? Could you imagine if you were at the door, you would, and you seen that, you'd wonder what the hell, right? So the guy says, are you standing here peeing on the wall of my house? Who are you? And where do you come from? Well, Lasse, he answered. He was so dazed and embarrassed and surprised. And as brainwashed as he was, he says, I come from a company that sells lexicon book collection. I'll give you the lexicon, he said angrily. I'm not interested, the guy says. Go to hell and get out of here. And he says, here I waged theocratic warfare to protect Jehovah's precious name. Imagine what a reputation would be spread about Jehovah's Witnesses. A Jehovah's Witness peeing on the wall. There was a Jehovah's Witness here who stood and peed on the wall of my house when I opened the door. Could you imagine that hitting the headlines of the newspaper? And he says, too bad I was so brainwashed. He says, I should have told the truth. But back then he lied. He gave the wrong answer. He didn't want to divulge who he was to protect Jehovah's name. And that's how we were all taught as Jehovah's Witnesses, that we had to protect Jehovah's name. And if this was in the paper the next day, he would probably lose all his privileges. He would not be an elder anymore. He would lose his pioneering privileges. So it'd be a big thing. So probably if he told the story to another elder, they would have said that he did the right thing. He used theocratic warfare strategy. So that was the part, the urinating in the ministry. I thought it was funny. But if you ever have a full bladder, it is not funny. It is painful if your bladder's full, and it's the worst thing in the world. So anyways, thanks for sharing that story with us, Lasse. That's a kind of a difficult one to share, but thanks for sharing it. Now it's out there, peeing on the wall. Now, he says, I also went to 16 different congregations. I was sent as a pioneer where there was a need. He got to know a large number of people. He knew about 2,000 witnesses, and many of them know him. He says it was tiring at conventions. Many people stopped and wanted to talk. And during the trial in Oslo, he says, I knew a lot of people. They looked at me in shock. And what on earth was I doing there talking to the witnesses of the state against the Jehovah's Witnesses, where we laughed and had a great time. Now, he said in one of his previous articles when he was at the state, last summer, it was just a year ago, he was on the other side of the fence. He hadn't really quit yet completely. So he was kind of working undercover for 14 years, and we ran a video on that too. Now, if you can imagine, all these witnesses were crowding into this courthouse. They knew him as a good standing Jehovah's Witness, but there he was on the side of the ex-witnesses at this court. And that kind of threw them all for a little bit of a loop. And it was good therapy for those Jehovah's Witnesses that were there to see that, you know what? Not all of them are staying on that side. A lot of them are being honest. They're waking up. So he says, how did I begin to wake up from my indoctrination? He says, this is something that made me wake up even more to how Jehovah's Witnesses have changed words. They make things fit with what they believe in their indoctrination. And he's going to give an example here of 1 Timothy 6, 3-5 in the New World Translation. I looked it up in this translation. This is the English Standard Version of the Bible. And he's going to look at if anyone teaches a different doctrine. Verse 4, he's puffed up with conceit, understands nothing, he has unhealthy cravings, and friction among people. Now, the point that he's talking about is mind, depraved in mind, and deprived of the truth. This is the point that he was talking about. Okay, so I just highlighted that. So the depraved of mind, that's what he's going at. Let's look at this. He says the 1983 edition of the New World Translation, which was used, and he was, it looks like Lasse would get at this stuff and study it and wonder, okay, why are they changing things? And here it says that mentally diseased. It uses that wording in the New World Translation. But if he's puffed up with pride, not understanding anything, he's mentally diseased over questioning and debates about words. So that's how they would view the apostates, Jehovah's Witnesses. They want to view the apostates. They want to make this about the apostates. It's nothing really about the apostates. But they want to make them mentally diseased so they can run around and give talks and quote their twisted little Bible at these assemblies and read. They're mentally diseased, the apostates. That's what bothered Lasse. And then they came out with a brand new Bible and they got rid of that because I guess he says they got some feedback on that. He says, I'll read it here. Then he is mentally diseased. This was something I reacted to strongly. This was a serious translation error that stigmatizes people as mentally ill. It got even worse when the new edition of the version of the New World Translation came out, and they tried to cover their tracks by replacing it with obsessed. So they actually just got rid of that piece and replaced it with he is obsessed. They still didn't use the right word, but that's what they did. You can check this out in your own New World Translation. Check it out with another Bible, King James or something. This other Bible says depraved in mind. It doesn't change it like they did. But it's interesting how Jehovah's Witnesses will change the Bible to fit their doctrine or fit their need. And they have went on for years talking about apostates as mentally ill. Now, he says, my head was completely confused. How is this possible? It was clearly stated in the preface to the New World Translations that they should be faithful to the original text. How could they change words and call the apostates mentally ill? And how could they replace Christ with Jehovah? So that's another thing that they've done in the New World Translation. They've inserted Jehovah in there 237 times. It's never been in there once in the New Testament. But this is something that this religion, JW they have done this. And that's why their translation cannot be called a Bible. You'll notice it on the cover, it cannot be called a Bible. They will get sued. It's a translation from the Bible. It's like the Book of Mormon. It's the Book of Jehovah's Witnesses. It is not a Bible. So don't use it as a Bible if you're trying to learn the Bible. Get a real Bible. Now here's his next shock. when he found out that Jehovah's Witnesses have been a member of the UN for over 10 years. Now, on this side of the fence, all of us pretty well know that, and we've seen lots of evidence on this, many videos. He says, I discovered this by chance when an inactive friend of mine told me a story that I'll never forget. He says, my friend had a son who had been at a youth party in the neighboring church where they discussed various things in the truth, as we called it at the time. And he had found on the YouTube that Jehovah's Witnesses have been a member of the UN for 10 years and told the others. So the other young people, so they were told not to believe everything they see on YouTube. And he had also told this to his father, this young guy, the Jehovah's Witness, that the witnesses were a member for 10 years. And the father believed this, rather. And even though it sounded strange. The Watchtower's interpretation of the UN, according to the book of Revelation, was that the UN was Satan's organization in opposition to God's kingdom. That's what we were all taught. And we studied that book many times, that Revelation book. So he goes on to say, to refute this, his father sent a letter to the UN and wanted an answer. A few days later, he received an answer, got a copy of the membership application papers, and thus began an even greater awakening for him too. So his father found out that, this kid's father found out that yes, they were a member of the UN, the Jehovah's Witnesses. So 2 days later, his son was suddenly visited by two elders who told him what he had said to several of the young people in the congregation, the neighboring congregation. So he had been reported by his friends to the elders in the neighboring congregation, and they contacted the elders in his congregation. They asked if he stood by what he'd said to his friends in the neighboring congregation, that Jehovah's Witnesses have been a member of the UN for 10 years. So he knew his father sent that letter in, got an answer, affirmative answer from the UN. So he answered affirmatively. He said yes. A week later, he was disfellowshipped as a 16-year-old for apostasy. This is in Norway. So it's no wonder these ex-Jehovah's Witnesses in Norway are up there talking about this to the state. And yet the Jehovah's Witnesses get up there and they lie through their teeth. They don't talk about any of this stuff. Now, how was this possible and to be disfellowshipped for something that was actually true? How could that be possible? Well, this shows how false the governing body was, who deliberately hides things that all Jehovah's Witnesses have the right to know. So he says, this woke me up even more. It started a huge amount of research on YouTube. This is the first part of my life story on how I slowly but surely woke up as an indoctrinated Jehovah's Witness. He says more parts are coming on Reddit. So we'll look forward to seeing some more of your stories, Lasse. Keep up the good work. You're a great apostate. And for any of you guys out there that want to get your stories out, you can send them to us, email them to us at mail@xjwtv. And we may use your story, may not, depending on the story. If you can publish it on Reddit or something like that, it makes it a lot easier for me to read the story. Or if you can write your whole story, if you're going to put it in an email, you'll put it all in one email. Don't send us 300 emails with little pieces of your story and expecting us to put this all together, because we're not going to do that. We're going to press delete, delete, delete to all 300 of your emails, and we're not going to do the work for you. You have to do the work for us. Put it into a story. Keep it short, shorter the better. And then we may give your story. It's nice if your story has some kind of a theme to it, but everybody's story is a little different. But thanks again. Send us your story, and we might cover it. Thanks to Lasse for this story and this story, how he woke up from Jehovah's Witnesses. So we will look for your story soon, and who knows, maybe you'll hear your story. But be careful. I may make a thumbnail like something a little different. I may take a piece out of your story. That's funny, like I did in this case. So thanks again, and we'll see you guys on the next video. But remember, keep living your life with love. That always works. Bye for now.